Star Network. I'm your regular host, Greg Carr, and this is our weekly hour devoted to conversations that lead to creating a better world, not only for African people, but for everyone working together in our common humanity. We're very excited today to have with us a towering intellectual, an activist, a son of Detroit, a man who is, for my generation, really a bridge figure, linking the previous generations of struggles of African people here in the United States and beyond to the current developments in the African world and the world beyond the African world. He is a master theorist. Dr. Errol Henderson is an academic. He has taught at a number of universities, most recently Wayne State University. He is a author of a number of scholarly articles, over 50 publications, and a number of books. His most recent book, Scriptures, Shrines, Scapegoats, and World Politics, is something we'll probably invite him back to have a conversation on at some point. The book we're going to focus on today, however, is the most ambitious, wide-ranging, and penetrating theoretical analysis of the Black Power movement to appear to date. It's called The Revolution Will Not Be Theorized. This was published in 2019. So we welcome here to the Black Table our friend, comrade, and brother, Errol Henderson. Welcome, Errol.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Brother Greg. Thank you so much for this wonderful invitation and a nice introduction.
Oh, brother, we kept it short because we want to get to the conversation. There's a whole lot more, so much more we could say. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about you in the generational context is because it seems that all the academics have discovered the American Negro and want to write about Black power, and we won't name no names. So maybe we will. We'll see how the conversation goes. But like I said, for our generation, I'll never forget, man, as you were finishing up there at Michigan, your PhD, and you published a book in the mid-90s, and that book on Afrocentrism and world politics, creating a new paradigm. Oh, you got it there, man. Come on, man. You got to pull out, you got to go into the stash, man, and pull out the stack. There it is right there. I remember, man, when we were in Detroit for NBUF, I think, National Black United Front. And, you know, we were all developing, trying to create a space where we could use the academy, go in there and basically take its tools and apply it to the problems of theorizing our ongoing movements. And it was such a pleasure to be there with you and so many people who are now ancestors, Conrad World, so many others, Baba Mario Badeli. You in this text have brought them all into a contemporary moment and theorized them and done it in a way that is extremely compelling. Do you mind maybe telling the viewers a little bit of your background and what led you into not only your intellectual work generally, but this particular book?
Oh, appreciate that, Brother Craig. Yeah, just born and raised in the Brewster Projects on the east side of Detroit. So I have people in my family who are the oldest ones. I'm the youngest of my father's 13, my mother's 9. So they were, we were very poor. We often didn't have even a television set and never had a car. But anyway, and I was pretty sickly as a child. So I often, we read a lot. There's the dictionaries and encyclopedias in the projects in our house, and but I often read, and I read my older siblings' books. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be able to, so I would just keep going. I read and I just kept going, but just to have conversations with them. I just wanted to have conversations. So anyway, some wonderful teachers from Miss Brown in the 3rd grade who gave me the autobiography of Malcolm X to read, because I had read all the books in my age grade. I didn't understand it, and in the 4th grade as well. So wonderful teachers there, Miss Tinsley. When I was in Foster Elementary School, so as I matriculated, as I went to school in the project, just the reality of being poor. The dealing with the police, the white police, stress, stop the robberies, enjoy safe streets. The police. I was 10 years old. I thought it was 9. I was 10, and they put a gun to my head, and while I was in my bed reading a Richie Rich comic book when they raided our house. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
They put a gun to my mother's head and my brother. So the repression of the police was there as well, even as you have nurturing things in the project. Well, I was a nut. And I wasn't interested in school. I got into a really good high school. It's a public high school in Detroit, but you had to be accepted into it. And then stuff just started happening, and I acted a nut. and I had to. I went to the Army at age 17. My parents actually had to write so I can get in because they wanted me to go there. Isn't it something to be safer than being in Detroit at that time? A lot of gangs out there, Young Boys Incorporated, a lot of violence. A lot of my friends were they were either rolling, selling drugs in the joint, or they were dead. And when I got out, my parents had died within an 18-month period, and I started school. I was never unintelligent, just uninterested.
Yes.
And I think I got my first semester of the semester my mother died. I got a 4.0 just on anger alone. You know what I'm saying? So, and then we started organizing. There was an event in 1983, the 15th anniversary of the Republic of New Africa. I still had a flyer here. I forgot to put it next to me. And that's where Chokwe Lumumba, Mario Badeli, people like Brother Apasha, Queen Mother Moore, Sister Neb Kigosili, these people were there, and they were telling us about this legacy, which I often heard of, but I never put it in practice. Yeah. And then in Chokwe especially, it's like bringing those people up to campus, use the university funds to fund them, use the university, transform the university, wonderful people like Mariba Williamson and so many wonderful, Sister Claritha, and we started organizing. Yes. So once I left back in and went to Michigan, when I went to Michigan, I was still on the east side of Detroit. I commuted to the University of Michigan because I didn't want to leave Detroit. And we started organizing, and we led a movement there in 86, 87 called UCAR/BAM3. And then I brought a lot of the Wayne State folks up there doing our movement there, which there's a frontline special about it. So it's not good, but you can see it's called Racism 101. Then at Wayne State in 89, many of those same students led a 12-day building occupation to get the Africana Studies Department created. Unfortunately, that department is now called African American Studies, but we set up Africana Studies because we were learning. We dusted off the old demands, and we held that building for 12 days to do that. So this is all the time. I'm a student. I'm a student at the University of Michigan.
I was going to say this is critical, man, because, and thank you. The reason I centered Wayne State instead of course, where you've been for the last 20 years up until this past December, which is, of course, Penn State University, is because it figures so prominently, but you sit at this nexus. I mean, while you are doing this, and of course, we talk about Save Our Sons and Daughters and how you bring some of these young cats together to kind of squash some of this beef. At the same time, you're Phi Beta Kappa. So you figured out a way to do this intellectual work, not at the center of your life and practice, but almost like on the periphery, but as a tool. I mean, and you bring all these ancestors in, now ancestors, all these elders of the previous generation into your work. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention that because I know I didn't mention Penn State before, but it just figures so prominently. You are indeed a son of Detroit, man, which many people, myself included, look at. If you got to pick one place, not Chicago or New York or LA, it's probably Detroit. I know the NOI would say, since Mecca is there, that Detroit is the center of Black nationalism in this country. But go ahead. I'm sorry, brother. I didn't mean to interrupt, Errol. Yeah,
and even before the NOI, which is on Hastings, remember Malcolm's famous say, is Hastings Street still there? Well, the project, the Brewster Project, where I was born on Senate Wine, the next street over is now the Christ the Free. That was Hastings, and the original temple was right on Hastings. But even before him, Anwar Pasha, he knew Farad. Chris Austin, he knew Farad. These are people who taught us if we would listen. People ask me why I talk the way I talk today, but they didn't see me when I would just shut the H up and just listen. And I would absorb this from these folks who were organizing with us then. Look here, there was a woman organizing with us in the late 80s, early 90s in Detroit. And she said one time to me, she said several times, she said, Errol, I never like what people say what they did in their time. She said, as long as I'm alive, it's my time. And I would always kiss that beautiful caramel cheek of hers and say, and ma'am, and long thereafter. That sister organizing with us in the late 80s. Her name is Rosa Parks. Okay,
come on now.
I'm not trying to hear these people talking about what they did back in their time. When I got that example right there, Gerald Baker, Marion Kramer, Max Stanford, Grace and James Barr. These are people we organized with in the 80s and 90s, and this is often not discussed because many historians don't look at that period, and especially many of these young historians who want to front like they still out here and they're activists now who are not. Because it invalidates them, and some of us never accepted that you had to choose either excellent intellectual pursuits or excellent activism. We got models that did both. But to promote both for today, especially many people in the academy, is to repudiate themselves. Because they're constantly trying to tell you what they're doing and writing books is revolutionary. No, you can write about it. But
Yes,
you
sir.
still got to go out in the street. And let me just say this: we here at State College, the first use of the police killing of a civilian in State College was Osage Osage. We organized around his death, and we had 2,000 people out here. And you'll see Errol Henderson out there too. But the leadership, people, Tierra Williams, there was 4 women, African-American, Nigerian-American, Sister Nanre, Latina, Sister, and a European-American, Melanie Morrison. And this was the leadership. But these are overwhelmingly white folks who we organized here. I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm talking about this is an ongoing struggle, but that was during COVID.
Yes,
so
sir.
If you're not activists today, stop calling yourself that. And all I'm saying is that there are many of us who are out here doing this, but often the people will not highlight us because it's a repudiation of themselves while they walk around here, got 5 names before their professorship, some kind of provost and distinguished this, and talking about they making revolution. Are you serious?
Sir. Yes, sir. Well, look, listen. This is exactly why we wanted to have you here for this initial, and we're going to have you back many times after this session at the Black Table, because you're really helping us understand the nexus. I mean, you've lived it. It's your life experience. When we come back from the break, we want you to continue in this and pour it right into this book, which really does bring this alive, this nexus of, I don't want to say scholar activism. We know, that too gets kind of complicated. So we're going to come back in a moment in a break with Dr. Errol Henderson, author of The Revolution Will Not Be Theorized, Cultural Revolution in the Black Power Era. We'll be back in a moment here at the Black Table.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to the Black Table here on the Black Star Network. I'm your regular host, Greg Carr, and we're joined today by my friend and brother, our comrade, Dr. Errol Henderson. Errol, when we left, you really walked us into a perfect point of entry for having this conversation about this text and why it's important. Reading recent scholarship, people think it's a revelation that when they call from Mississippi to say, hey, man, we're in a war here with these police, and they call John Conyers' office, Rosa Parks is the one answered the phone. And in some ways, that's how Chokwe Lumumba and them end up down there. Now his son's the mayor. I mean, the connections you draw are not research connections, although you're a master scholar. They are connections, mouth to ear, street to street, fist to face, all of this folded together. In this book, you evoke the spirit of another son of the Black Power movement, and certainly someone whose influence, not only in Detroit, but now globally, kind of anchors so much of the Black Power movement work, as you talk about in later chapters, of course, the Republican New Africa and everyone else. Malcolm X. In fact, you call Malcolm X the most influential theorist of the Black Power movement. How important in your mind is it for us to understand what we call the Black Power movement now, and all these academics writing these historical autopsies in their minds, I'm sure, of the Black Power movement? How important is it for us to understand it as a theoretical contribution as well as its antecedents even through today? But walk us through like why you came to write this book and how you situate Malcolm in a way that very few, if any, other people do as a theorist.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I think it's so important that to appreciate Malcolm's, to appreciate Black nationalism. And this is what's going on in so much of academia and in some movement circle is an anti-Black nationalism because they haven't studied Black nationalism. And I hope we can talk about that. That's why I devote a whole chapter to it, disabusing it of some myths around it. But Minister Malcolm is central. Minister Malcolm theorizes revolution in the United States. And this is what makes him so important. But often Malcolm is appreciated in his activism, but not as a theorist. So think about, Minister Malcolm said, when you think about his argument about revolution, and he talks about revolution based on land, and revolutions involve bloodshed, and he traces us through. This from Message to the Grassroots, was delivered in Detroit in 1963. So, but remember he says, revolutions are bloody, okay? But then in Ballad of the Bullet, Malcolm says these words and these words exactly. But America's in a unique position. She's the only country in history in a position actually to become involved in a bloodless revolution. Hold up, Malcolm. You just said revolutions are bloody. Now this is a bloodless revolution. What was the bloodless revolution? Malcolm was transforming theoretically, not transforming because some Algerian asked him, where does black nationalism leave me? Malcolm could have responded, where does Arab nationalism leave me? What are you talking about?
Yes, sir.
That's not central. It's central to integrationist argument. What Malcolm was saying is that Malcolm posed that the necessity of a cultural revolution in the United States to transform the culture of Black Americans so that then they can proceed to a political revolution, okay? And why? Because we're people who are denied. We face death just to learn how to read and write. We often were taught we didn't have a culture. So we couldn't mimic the processes that were going on in Africa or the so-called third world, because many of those folks that were not minorities, they were majorities. They are aware of their culture, that colonial apparatus was imposed on them. So their main objective was to destroy the colonial apparatus, remove it, so that they can then have their own cultural flowering. I mean, from Nyerere to Amilcar Cabral, this is what they're struggling with, okay? That's not what we face. We have people who are often were denied that we had a culture at all. Right. And this goes back to what Harold Cruz is saying, another person who's denigrated by these anti-nationalists, and the anti-nationalists go from the so-called radical integrationists to the Marxists, the neo-Marxists, especially American Marxists, who have little appreciation of this cultural dimension. Oh, they'll bring up Gramsci, but they won't bring up Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. Du Bois is posing a thesis on Black cultural revolution published in 1935 in Black Reconstruction, while Gramsci is in one of Mussolini's jails. Yes, sir. Not mad at Gramsci. Why would I walk over all the folks who have fought for our liberation and studied our liberation right here? Go to an Italian Marxist and tell me how to work through revolution in my country. No question. In fact, let me ask you about that, Errol, because one of the many brilliant points in the book, you walk us through these early theoreticians. I mean, when you say that in many ways, Du Bois and Black Reconstruction historicizes this movement and gives us some political language in some ways. And then you say he misses the moment perhaps for someone like an Alain Locke, who in some ways theorizes the movement, gives that kind of voice to what could become a cultural articulation. And then of course, Harold Cruz, which, I mean, again, people writing about Cruz, but you got a different point of entry for Cruz when you say he gives us some articulation of how that might look in terms of institutional forms, particularly with the use of mass communication media. And in doing that, when you say, and by the way, those of you who will read the book now, and there's a version of it, we'll put a link in the show notes so you all can actually read this for yourselves. When you lead us through the Revolutionary Action Movement, through us, through the Republic of New Africa, and then through the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and through the Congress of African Peoples and the Shrine of the Black Madonna, you grapple with this question of culture. In fact, like you say, you devote a whole chapter to grappling with this. And could you let us give us some insight into how you think about how Malcolm X, this major theoretician taken from us far too soon, how those who come in the wake, whether it be the Obadeli brothers, whether it be James Grace, well, not James Grace Lee Boggs in that sense, but others like, those who at the shrine, certainly, how they, perhaps the Panthers, us, miss the kind of organic development of this cultural thesis and fall victim to a term that I thought was fascinating, this reverse civilizationism, skipping over African-American culture, whereas Du Bois, who himself not particularly religious, as we know, still sees the value of the Black church, but they missed that moment. Walk us through how these organizations come in the wake of Malcolm, and as you say, the question of culture never quite connects to this question of organizing African people in the United States. And I so appreciate that, Brother Carr. Please keep me on point. But this is Alain Locke, the Pulitzer Prize winning biography of Alain Locke. It speaks to this because Alain Locke wrote about culture in ways that no one at the time did. The first African-American wrote. But I want to come back to that. Essential. Wilson Moses is creative conflict in African-American thought. It engages with these different theoretical arguments. Wilson Moses' work on black nationalism is excellent. And Wilson Moses don't like black nationalism.
Listen,
but
man.
He's an excellent historian that he gives it its due.
Errol,
These other folks will write us out. So let me speak directly to your
Errol,
point.
I got to pause you for a minute there, because not only do you lift Wilson Moses and Sterling Stuckey, the first time I met Wilson Moses was on the campus of Penn State University. I went out there to see him. Now, I'm a naive black nationalist and Pan-Africanist, so I'm bringing him after having read his work. He is an excellent scholar, but he is not a black nationalist. We got into a conversation about John Henry Clark. You know what he said? I don't agree with the man ideologically, but I respect the man's scholarship. This is the kind of complicated analysis you put in this book. It's not black and white. These academics miss the point. Talk to us, man. And of course, Wilson Moses, another Detroiter, man. So,
yeah, from the east side of Detroit. Ain't that something? And I never met him until I got to Penn State, but I first met his books in the Shrine of Black Madonna bookstore on the west side of Detroit when I was a student. But you're right on point, is that part of the problem is too many historians are writing this with very little political analysis. They write narrative history, or when they do put political analysis, they graft it. They want to make Malcolm a radical integration. Malcolm was calling himself a black nationalist on the Friday before his assassination. He said, if you want to see the black nationalists, come down to the Audubon. He wasn't confused. Those were his words exactly. That is the one to see the black nationalists. That's the Friday before his assassination. But these folks have convinced you that he was some kind of looking to be a Marxist. What did he say about why Khrushchev and Mao couldn't get together? He said that Russian Revolution, that was white nationalism. He said, so anyway, but I want to stay on point.
No, that's not anyway, because of course, as you know, and have written and discussed, as we know, not only is he calling himself that, but shortly before he makes transition there at the Audubon Ballroom, who's standing up there next to him? Fannie Lou Hamer, who they want to make into an integration. So, please understand. But go ahead, Bob. You about to make a point on Cruz.
So the Christ of the Negro intellectual. So Cruz is with us in Michigan. He's one of the professors that supported us. There were quite a few black professors, some of them prominent now, who did not support us in our student movement. But Cruz, what's so important about this is his focusing on culture. And I want to make sure I hit reverse civilizationism. But Cruz is talking about how to revolutionize the civil rights movement. People denigrate Cruz, or these anti-nationalists will, because they don't like something he said about Michael Gold and Lorraine Hansberry. Meanwhile, Marxists will cite Althusser, who killed his wife. He killed his wife, but they'll still cite his work. I'm supposed to give up Harold Cruz because you don't like something he wrote about Michael Gold. That'd be for real. But that's how trivially they'll speak black theorists. He's not making a universal theory about a revolution. He's talking about how to revolutionize an ongoing movement, the civil rights movement. He's not making a general theory. So that's what people miss. What Malcolm is appreciating is that he thinks that the Africans are ahead of the African Americans with respect to their revolutionary orientation. And some of this now is due to their cultural clarity. Okay. Malcolm, many black nationalists of the 19th century, and Moses talks about this. Black nationalism is the oldest theoretical orientation or ideological orientation of black Americans. It goes back to the 18th century, not the 19th. But in the 19th century, he said many of the black nationalists used the language of civilizing the African, you see? And we call that civilizationism, to bring Christianity and technology, okay? But they weren't white supremacists. Don't get it twisted. So they used that language, though. And Moses calls that civilization. Malcolm, but when Du Bois comes along, Du Bois shows that not only do African Americans have a culture, the only cultural product that's legitimately cultural product that comes from America in the sense of the body politic, not including the Native Americans who were taken out of the body politic, but that African Americans culture, this is what he evokes, the sorrow songs, etc. But also Africans has a long, majestic culture, how you say, almost. We're talking about ancient, not just ancient Egypt, but Africa throughout Africa. Well, sub-Saharan Africa. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over words.
No. To make the point you're making, in the 19th century, it's not static, as you say. Whether it be Edward Wilmot Blyden, who goes with a very Christian orientation, but by the time you get to Christianity, Islam, and the Negro race, he realizes in African life and customs, he's being radicalized by continental Africans, or Martin Delaney, as you raised, who's got on African clothes one moment and a Union uniform the next moment. Like you said,
oh my goodness.
Come on, bro.
So you mean black folks can actually learn and develop their theoretical sense. One of the people who helped us organize, walking around with a kufi at almost 90 years old, was a brother named Chris Austin. Chris Austin was one of the most important Communist Party organizers and his father's house is where Noble Drew Ali Moorish Science Temple met on Leland Street in Detroit. He's the first one to tell me about Cali House and the ex-slave bounty and pension association. But he's wearing a kufi organizing on the east side of Detroit. This is Chris Austin. This is a different kind of Marxist. You see what I'm saying? So I want to be clear. So what Malcolm says is that Africans, unlike the 19th century nationalists who said Americans would civilize the Africans, Malcolm said, look, they're ahead of us.
Yes, sir.
Remember the famous quote? He said, what you leave out? You left your mind in Africa.
Left your mind.
Malcolm, so he reverses it. He says African Americans need to follow Africans. This was a fundamental error, okay? And I'm not mad at Malcolm. It's not personal. And this is what these other folks get. I'm not writing biographies. And I'm not trying to go home with these people. Right. I'm trying to develop their theoretical argument. Well, what I say about Malcolm, if Malcolm could have seen Watts, if he could have seen what black folks would do right after the Voting Rights Act, if he could only have lived to see Watts, he would have changed this. He would have said, oh, we don't have to follow anyone, because there's no historical figure, no historical people that fits our present situation of racial minority in the most powerful country in the world that doesn't have initial but has secondary, doesn't have primary, has secondary land claim rights. There's nothing else like us. The closest that comes to it is the Irish. So we would say that Michael Collins would have been a better mold than Che Guevara. Because if he's not in the belly of the beast, he's in the large intestine. He brings England to the bargaining table. That's Michael Collins, who was excellent at urban guerrilla warfare, among other things. Yes, but they were enamored with the Che Guevaras, and I'm not mad at them. No. Well, I mean, our analysis after 50 years. Well,
this is, and I think this is where we want to go in the next block. We're going to take a break. When we come back, will you walk us through how this plays itself out after the death of Malcolm X, like with everything from Drum to Cap to us? And when we come back in a moment with you, Errol, we're going to pursue this as it takes on organizational form. So we'll be back in a moment here at the Black Table with our guest, Dr. Errol Henderson. This is an incredible conversation, you all. So come right back after the break and we'll continue here on the Black Table.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
Welcome back to the Black Table here on the Black Star Network. Please support the Black Star Network. Download the app, join the Bring the Funk fan club, tell all your friends. This conversation is one that you won't find anywhere else. So in fact, support all the shows here on the network. When we left with our guest, Dr. Errol Anthony Henderson, we were talking about this question of African culture here in the United States, African American culture, and the distinct nature of it. Errol, you write so powerfully, not only about these theoreticians, and you weave everybody from James and Grace Lee Boggs to Harry Haywood, the whole conversation between the Marxists and the Black nationalists. But you talk about the applied theory in these major organizations. Take your pick, brother. I don't know whether you want to start with the Revolutionary Action Movement, our friend and brother, Muhammad Ahmad, of course, the great Max Stanford. If you want to talk about us and, of course, the impact of us, even to this day, as you write about it in terms of its cultural dimensions, the Black Panthers, maybe you want to pursue some of that and how their focus on The lumpen, so to speak, proletariat provides both a point of entry, but a missed set of opportunities. Certainly your conversation around Drum and your conversation around the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, focusing on the working class folk in the community, really opens some insights. And these are many things many of our people who are watching now may not be aware of, at least initially, but they probably know some people who were touched by some of this stuff. And then, of course, the Congress of African People, the cultural turn, some of the institutions that still exist to this day, like Third World Press that you write about, and the Shrine of the Black Madonna, which, of course, is still going strong. Any of those, brother, please walk us through how, and you might combine all of them. I know, more than capable of doing that, how this question that Malcolm leaves provides points of entry, also missed opportunities, and maybe some engagement with this vibrant, living African-American culture that Du Bois is aware of, that Locke theorizes in some ways, and that Cruz says must be at the center of anything we do that is uniquely Africans here in the United States.
Yes, and isn't this something that Cruz argued that one of the shortcomings that we have was that we didn't control media in the 1960s, and meanwhile. And folks are asking me in the era of social media, what's the relevance of Harold Cruz? The 50th anniversary of Harold Cruz' publication, 1967, the Christ of Negro Intellectual, there was no commemoration of this, no celebration at the University of Michigan, the department he largely established, none. And a wonderful brother named James Taylor at the University of San Francisco organized one there. So part of it is destroying is making a caricature of the theoretical arguments these folks make, or reducing them to, as David Hilliard, the Black Panther Party, said of the white left, they want the Panthers for their thuggery, not their theory. So when Malcolm is talking about the need for a cultural revolution, what groups like RAM, just like the wonderful brother who was so helpful to me, brother Muhammad Ahmed, Max Sanford, Wanda Marshall, and others, they took aspects of Malcolm's thesis, but they didn't take its totality. And one of the biggest shortcomings of it was that they treated it as a finished product, but Malcolm hadn't developed it. Like Martin, he's killed before he's 40 years old. So RAM takes aspects of it, and so do the other groups. But often there's a misappreciation of what the biggest thing he was theorizing, which Manny Marble devotes no time to in his book, is a cultural revolution. So the issue becomes, do you need a cultural revolution to stimulate a political revolution? When he's talking about culture, he's not talking about aesthetics. He's talking about material culture. When I try to make it plain to folks, I say, move from thinking about Dre with NWA as a member to Dre's beats. You see? The material aspect of going from the culture to the aesthetic to the material, and of course thinking about art and then thinking about architecture. So we're talking about physical. So sometimes people will reduce this to some type of ideational construct.
Errol, before we move from that, though, man, that's a powerful metaphor. Please help us understand how you balance these things, the material culture, materiality, materialist analysis with the cultural analysis. Because as you say, it's almost as if people try to pick one or the other. I'm thinking about whether it be Cedric Johnson or Terrell Reed. I mean, there's a materialist argument now that kind of dismisses the culture element in some ways. And then there's a cultural element that dismisses the materialist element. And as you write about in Us, which has been hugely influential in many ways in culture, they're not Marxists. They come to socialism, but all this is a work in progress. How do you theoretically kind of describe what is a clear tension, sometimes open conflict between Marxism and the cultural dimension? How do you reconcile that in your work, and how do these organizations and individuals and communities kind of reconcile it, even if they're not doing it consciously as they grapple with trying to serve our people?
Because they didn't study Black nationalism in the theoretical sense. And I'm not mad at them. They're doing other things. You know what I'm saying? Other important things. But it goes back to the general strike and slave. There was a slave revolution. If you know the big lie, that's the biggest lie. There was a slave revolution. That's not a metaphor. I mean that empirically, theoretically. There's a slave revolution that Du Bois talks about in Black Reconstruction. 196,000 that joined the Union Army to fight against their former slave masters, and 300,000 in support. Neither the Union nor the Confederacy had as their initial war aims the freedom of slaves. We did that. And how do we do that? Through an alliance with the Union Army. And folks say this superficial Marxists say, like, well, you can't. Now you're going to organize with the capitalists. Tell me one war you find that's fought without allies. These people not saying these are our friends. These are our allies. And these same people will then laud Mao Zedong for his alliance with other folks, including Richard Nixon, as his practical politics or his strategic thinking. But black folks can't have that strategic thing. So what I want to make sure, this nexus between cultural revolution and political, it's not a contradiction in the condition of black Americans. So there was a slave revolution that shows the model. There was a transformation of slave religion in the slave quarters that supported the general strike, what Du Bois calls the general strike. But beyond the general strike, Frederick Douglass made it clear that you got many whites, and they don't want to fight a so-called, I won't use the word, the type of war, the N-word war.
Yes, sir.
They don't want to fight that. They're destroying, they're killing Negroes in orphanages.
That's right. 1863.
It's Frederick Douglass that comes to Lincoln and makes the argument that you need to make the war, change the war aims from the overthrow of the Confederate States of America to the overthrow of slavery. That was us.
Yes.
See? So, but if you don't see us as thinkers, you won't see the contradiction. Now, because there was so much loss after the Hayes-Tilden sellout from 1865 to 1877, that they don't study the victory. But we won. We overthrew chattel slavery. We defeated the Confederate States. That's the victory. Look, I use this analogy. If you win the heavyweight championship belt in the round, in the ring, you beat, let's make it Mike Tyson, and you win the heavyweight championship, right? Yeah. On your way home, somebody rob you and take your belt. You're still the heavyweight champion.
The champ.
Analogy to Reconstruction.
Because,
so if you want to learn how to become champion, study what happened in the ring. You want to learn how to wage revolution in this country. The only successful revolution in this country in the U.S. body was the slave revolution. They didn't study it like that. Graham came close to it because they studied the general strike. You can see it in their discussions, and I talk about this quite a bit. Us realized this. Us and the Panthers, they separated the two. So their quarrel becomes, could you have a cultural revolution before a political revolution, or must you have a political revolution that will then recreate its own culture? That's what the Panthers' position was. The first one was us's position. But this should have been something that had been resolved a century earlier. But they didn't study, even our activists didn't study them as theorists. And then from your theory comes your strategy. We don't keep this in the abstract. From your strategy comes your program. Let me ask. The programming of the Panthers was separate from us. And the beauty of I'm sorry. Go ahead. G.
No. You make that point about the beauty of us, though, brother. Please.
Yes, the beauty of us is not so simply Kwanzaa and the attempt to make Watts an independent city. That's often not studied in the study of us. Scott Brown's work is excellent. But it's James M. Toomey. And Toomey is one of the important theorists in us. Us is not reducible to Maulana Karenga.
No.
But in Toomey, and think of the relevance of Toomey. Think about Kwanzaa on the one hand and juicy fruit on the other one. You don't have juicy fruit, you don't have Biggie. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Well, that's right. Well, but that's why I love that Dre analogy you made. You know, I mean, the whole notion of NWA. Listen to the beats. This steady beat, which finds, of course, institutional formation, as you write, in the Black church. That church that Du Bois centers, that church that Locke understands, that church that's rejected, as you say, whether it be us or the Panthers, that church that finds some iteration in the form of the shrine, but a rejection in camp in some ways. You know, but the modality continues. And I think this is part of the genius of your work, brother. You, even as you're critiquing these institutional formations, you're also lifting up the fact that those who are the closest in terms of working with our people, whether it be the League, you know, certainly the Shrine, are still benefiting from that connection. We got about a minute left on the clock. I don't know if you want to make a comment, and then we'll come back after the break and continue.
And remember, Huey and a lot of these folks come to this realization after, but often folks won't study them after the 60s. Huey said, when the Black Panther Party distanced ourselves from the Black church, we would distance ourselves from the Black community. He realized that. And of course, Jaramogi institutionalized this. And when I talk about this, that beautiful picture of the Black Madonna and Child painted by Glanton Dowdell, you know who's holding the brushes while Glanton's painting that? General Baker, the Marxist leader of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. They meet in Cleves, Jaramogi's church too.
Yes, sir.
Folks, I don't accept these artificial dichotomies when that wasn't the lived experience of these folks, and they theorized it. So I'm trying to build on their work, you know, not trying to act like I'm out here like I would have took the shots at UCLA, or I would have been engaged in the guerrilla warfare, low crawling with them, I'm trying to build on that work, the theoretical, the strategizing that will be used, and not just glamorizing what Sekou Odinga and so many others does with the liberation of Assata Shakur, but looking at how he theorized and strategized for Black liberation.
That's
and
right.
It hurts my heart that I would come to some of these brothers and sisters after many discussions, and you can see often they didn't want to talk. But once they found out I wasn't a historian and I'm not doing a biography, I went to work on their theory, how they thought. They were just, oh my good, they were nonplussed. And it was like few people had ever asked them about their theorizing. And that's why they work with me so much. And plus they work with me as an activist too, as like a younger brother too.
And I think that's the key to this, man. I think you one of the few people who could have even done this kind of work. And the fact that you did it is a real testament. We're going to come back after the break, and we want you to continue this conversation and kind of lead us into your analysis of what we see today in terms of these institutional formations and Black struggle here in the United States. So we'll be back in a moment with our friend and brother and comrade, Errol Anthony Henderson, author of The Revolution Will Not Be Theorized, Cultural Revolution in the Black Power Era, back here on the Black Star Network with the Black Tape. Back in a moment.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back to the Black Star Network here at the Black Table. Please support the Black Star Network. Download the app, join the Bring the Funk fan club, tell your friends, and you see the kind of conversation we're having today. And on all our shows, you have this type of quality. Errol, when we left, you again having us understand how folk in the wake of some of these movements, some of which persist, continue to benefit from theorizing this work, and you've done it as well. You know, I had so many questions. We're going to have you back. Of course, we're going to have you back anyway, but we may have to do a part 2 on this book in particular because, you know, the historically Black colleges. We talked a couple of weeks ago on the show about Ralph Bunche and how Bunche, his analysis of decolonialism, didn't benefit from his faculty colleague Elaine Locke, who was right there. You talk a little bit about how Du Bois glimpses the possibilities of education, and even Hakeem Al-Budi and them. And even us at some moment in terms of independent institution building, we both, of course, know and work with institution builders, whether it be CB or any of those formations. In fact, last time I saw you physically, you were there, you gave words at the ritual for Kwame Kenyatta, of course, at the Wright Museum, your beloved Wright Museum. Could you talk a little bit about how these institutions continued to develop and have impacted even our work today, and how theoretical work is at the center of this lived work, this practice?
Yes, and it's so important that folks appreciate, when I talk about theory and talk about empirical theory, I mean theory, you need theory to guide your doctrine, and then your strategy and your program. For example, if you got if you got a theory that argues for the violent overthrow of a country, then you don't have a doctrine that's defensive. You see, you need an offensive strategy, offensive doctrine, and then strategies, and the classic ones we teach in military science: maneuver, attrition, and punishment. The punishment can include guerrilla warfare, will fall into that. Then you have to, and some folks thought about these seriously, because you had, not just because you had veterans like Gaidi Obadeli, Brother Damu, a range of veterans, but all the way back to the Black abolitionists that Kelly Jackson writes about with that wonderful little firearm on the front of her book. Black abolitionists who fought like Harriet and Harriet Hayden and others. But I also want to make this point when I get to this. You mentioned these 2 books, The Revolution and my latest book. Both of those books, when I publish, are free. Okay. This one's published by University of Michigan Press. This is from SUNY. They're not obscure presses. They're free. And what strikes me is you have folks who will make a class analysis, and this comes from growing up in the project. but they don't know how to make their book free. I'm not against selling books, don't get me wrong. But when you don't deal with the state of academia today, where a lot of this information is embargoed, they don't have, but you got a class analysis about other things, you should be challenged on that.
Absolutely. Today, and by the way, you all, by free, he means, of course, the digital versions, which can be downloaded, will provide the information that you can get those.
And of course, I'll send a PDF of the whole book to anybody who's interested. But they are free, and it's through what's called the Tome Initiative. They will make your books free, and it's not just So I want to make that clear.
Yes.
But to your point, when you don't have folks grounded in this, you get stuff like this. There was an article by, I think, Robin Kelly in the Boston Review. He was talking about the debate between Michael Dyson and Cornel West, which don't interest me remotely. That Black intellectuals disagree. Who cares? You're supposed to disagree. But watch this. He says the resolution of their disagreement is to be found in Jackson, Mississippi. In all his analysis, Robin Kelly, so you know Jackson, that's Chokwe Lumumba and then Chokwe Antar and Sister Rukia Lumumba, right?
Absolutely.
At no time does he mention Black nationalism. How do you invoke that without that? That's what I mean.
Let's take a moment here because we don't have a whole lot of time. But I want you to elevate that, because you talk, particularly when you talk about the shrine, how much of this energy gets driven into Black elected officials, and how this whether it be Ras Baraka in Newark, of course, you trace the history through CAP or Committee for Unified Newark, and whether it be Jackson, as you say, with our friend and brother Antar and our sister Rukia, and what's going on in Jackson, Malcolm X grassroots movement and all that, and of course you evoke Sekou Dinga is very important. You know, to do how should we look at contemporary moments? We see these young brothers in Tennessee, for example, the brother Justin Pearson in the well of the Tennessee legislature with a dashiki on, but sounding like Martin Luther King. Help us understand the legacy of this Black Power movement, the living legacy as it continues, and how politics is just one dimension of the impact of this movement.
It's constantly Black. It's constantly Black, and it's constantly oriented toward Black nationalism. From Black Lives Matter today, which really comes out of the movement for justice for Oscar Grant. And what people often confuse is the decentralized leadership. Composition of your movement doesn't suggest its revolutionary value. So because you have an expansive group of Blacks, from Black women, Black men, to trans people, that doesn't suggest your movement is revolutionary. Just like you have the gay oriented log cabin Republicans, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't mean it's revolutionary. It's your strategy and objectives.
This is a critical point to make. Your identity isn't your politics. Is that what you're saying? Right. People might confuse. See, this is a very important point you're raising here, bro. Yeah.
Remember what I remember Jesse said that. He said, I think we should be sober. But you don't get points for being sober. That doesn't tell me about your character. That doesn't tell me about your. So that's what's important, to look at their actual theory. And one of the reasons the book is so big is because I quote them extensively. So people don't say, well, Brother Errol, you impose theory upon them. No, listen to their own words. So today, part of the challenge, when you hear people that are just ignorant, I'm not mad at them, but they should study. When they say it's not just your grandmother's civil rights movement. If you knew the civil rights movement, you wouldn't talk like that. You see? So it's looking at the theory, and what happens when you don't have theory and you're talking about anti this and anti this. I don't define myself in those ways. What fills in for theory? Often some neo-Marxism, some liberal integrationism, or some radical integrationism. They're anti-Black nationalists. So even as they pose paradigms for Black liberation, they remove the one paradigm that's specifically key to that, and they often make a caricature of it. They won't let you reduce Marxism to Stalinism, but they'll reduce Black nationalism to the worst representative of it. Have no sense of progressive or revolutionary Black nationalism. So the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, they took the model of the general strike, which is our model. You can argue that even the Montgomery bus boycott, but those are aspects of general strikes. But general strikes that were transformative, like during the slave revolution. That's what's key. I fleshed that out in the book. Mm-hmm.
I would be remiss. We only got a couple minutes left. If I didn't ask you what your thoughts are about maybe some of the current Black studies formations, the poetic turn. They're talking about the poetics of this, the poetics of that. But I mean, you know, one turn is away from Black nationalism, but the other turn seems to make everything Black nationalism. I don't know if you have any thoughts about how the Black Power movement teaches us the relationship between theory and practice has to be kind of organic. I mean, I see a lot of fascinating stuff on black Afrofuturism, all this, but I'm wondering what the political dimensions of it are. If you have any thoughts about that.
Yes, and I don't fit these arbitrary modes. I'm also a published poet, published by a university press, so not just stuff I publish myself. But I have no patience with critical fabulation. We want empirical theory to change an empirical reality. Now, as a scholar, I'm methodologically plural and I'm broad. I say that with my students. I'm dogmatically against dogma and absolutely against absolutes. Okay, so people will hear how I talk, but in the classroom, I don't do advocacy. I do accuracy. People didn't sign up in my class to become my advocate, and I don't want them to be. But accuracy may sound like advocacy. That's why I don't call myself, it's not anti-racist. No, what they're doing, that's white supremacists. It's lying. Go ask them what their problem is. I don't have a name for not believing in Santa Claus. I don't call myself an anti-Clausian. So I don't call myself what I'm anti with white supremacism, which is inherently, even as beyond it being morally odious, is inaccurate as a social scientist. So in the humanities where folks want to indulge that, no problem. But when you have folks with like the critical fabulation work where they invent history instead of just calling what they're doing fiction or novel, I have little patience with that. So I do quantitative work. I'm methodologically plural. I do a range of different types because my methods are not my identity either. What you have is folks who depend on the ignorance of those listening to them to create caricatures of the actual tools for their liberation. But didn't the old heads tell us before, people who won't treat you right won't teach you right.
That's right.
Everything that comes in the form of black folks don't mean that's oriented towards your liberation.
No
so the book is 500 pages because I developed these theoretical arguments. And when people say, well, Brother Errol, well, how you know people like, the grassroots going to read that? I said every weekend you find the grassroots reading books with words like Thessalonians, Corinthians. I still don't know what a Corinthian is, Brother Greg, but because we got dictionaries.
Come on, brother. Come on.
Growing up poor in the projects,
yes,
and
sir.
Make a caricature out of poverty.
Yes,
you go to a spelling bee in the most ghetto black community, and you'll see all types of folks out there encouraging their children. I don't like that caricature, especially coming from people who were never poor, who don't appreciate grassroots folks, even as they invoking them. That's why they don't want to study black nationalism in a serious way, and they want to talk about black. But when it comes to thinking and theorizing, they got some white scholar for that. And believe me, I study Marx, as you see in the book. I study a range of them. But I'm not beholden to these folks.
No,
these
sir.
Folks are waiting. You got these neo-Marxists waiting on a Marxist revolution as much as religious folks waiting on Jesus, but they'll denigrate the religious folks. At least the religious folks are down there in communities each day. You want to glorify the Panthers for feeding people. You know how many people Adam Powell? I'm talking about the old man Powell. He bringing prostitutes into the church. During the Depression, he's feeding people. Are you serious?
Yes, sir.
In fact, it's being truthful to this history and developing it. I'm sorry if I try to people and evoke folks who are not here. So I'm sorry if I didn't stay on point.
That's a perfect way for us to pause until we continue this conversation in another session, because devoted to the folk, devoted to the people. You can't go wrong as long as you stay devoted and grounded in the people. Listen, Brother Errol, we want to thank you for this initial conversation we've had, for your work, not only for the long arc of your work, but for this particular work, which allows us to, kind of reset the way we think about things that have never stopped since we were snatched, and certainly go back to even before that, because you even got Sheikh Anta Job in here, brother. So I'm like, I ain't mad at you. So listen, Errol, thank you, man. Thank you for coming. And we look forward to the next time we have a conversation with you, brother.
You're welcome. It's been I'm so grateful to you for having me.
It's good to have you. So we'll be back in a moment to clear the table and get ready for next week. And we'll see you in a second.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Errol Henderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Back to the Black Table here on the Black Star Network. Support the network, download the app, join the Bring the Funk fan club, tell your friends and family, not only here in the U.S., but around the world about these conversations, and support all our shows. We've just had a powerful hour with Dr. Errol Anthony Henderson, author of The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. I'm thinking about Gil Scott Heron. The Revolution Will Not Be Theorized, Cultural Revolution in the Black Power Era. This book is available free for download. It's very important for him that he did that work because it's coming out of our people and it needs to be accessed by everyone. Dr. Henderson has always been about that in his life and career. I'll end with a quick quote from one of Dr. Henderson's elders and mine, who is now an ancestor. We've talked to him here at the table before he made transition, the great John Bracey, who Dr. Henderson quotes in this book, in fact. And Errol Henderson quotes John Bracey, and we see him as a founding parent of the field of Black studies. Dr. Bracey once said that people spin theories out of very thin margins of knowledge. Well, this book and the work of this brother, Errol Henderson, is not one of those people who are spinning theories out of thin margins of knowledge. In fact, it is quite the opposite. So if you get a chance, and please take the time to read The Revolution Will Not Be Theorized, and then look around you with new eyes and realize that a lot of the people who fought this struggle are still out here swinging with both fists. So we'll see you next week here at the Black Table. And again, support the network. We'll see you next week.